Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So today's video is entitled "The Event and Phrase by an African American Activist That Inspired the Name of Brazil's Black Consciousness Day." Black Consciousness Day is an important day. It's on November 20th every year in Brazil. It's a day where it represents the Black Brazilian struggle for equality in Brazilian society. It's a day that uh, the population brings back the memory of the great African warrior in Brazil. His name was Zumbi dos Palmares. He was a leader of the largest quilombo or maroon society in Brazilian history, where fugitive slaves mounted their own community. And some reports say this community could have had anywhere from 50 to 100,000 people. So every November 20th, every November, the Black rights struggle in Brazil is something that makes a lot of headlines. It's a lot of blogs and videos are dedicated to this particular day. It was just yesterday, or well, I don't know when I'm going to post this video, so I'll just say it was on Monday, November 20th of this year, just either yesterday or the day before. And so on the morning of November 20th, I happened to be checking out a video by a friend of mine, an activist, longtime activist and important piece in Brazil's Black movement, the recognition of Black contributions to Brazilian society. My friend Carlos Alberto Medeiros. I first became aware of Carlos and his friend Filó. I think it was a book called Orpheus and Black Power by Michael Hanchard in the United States. And ever since I read that book and just came to understand how important these two guys were in documenting Black cultural history in Brazil, I'm like, I had to meet that guy. I finally was able to meet Carlos sometime in 2014, as well as Filó. I'm going to be talking a little bit about them later on in this video. But it was a video that Carlos posted yesterday morning, on the morning of the Day of Black Consciousness, and it just struck me like, oh wow, you just as much as I know about the history of Black Brazil, there's still things that that come out from time to time that I just didn't know. So with this little piece of information, it was something that I said I definitely wanted to share with my audience. Okay, so let's just get right into this video today. The event and phrase by an African American activist that inspired the name of Brazil's Black Consciousness Day. Anybody want to take a shot in the dark who that African American activist was or is? All right, well, let's just get into it. Okay, so today's material comes courtesy, the information that I gather comes courtesy of the Museu Regional de São João del Rei, Esquerda Online, and Projeto Colabora, right? So let's just get right into this video today. So as I mentioned in a previous video, November 20th is recognized as Brazil's Day of Black Consciousness. Although I've done thousands of articles and videos about Black Brazil, and some specifically about November 20th and the legendary quilombo warrior known as Zumbi dos Palmares, the historical figure that the November 20th date recognizes, there is still so much more to know about the history of Black Brazil. I've been into the Black Brazil thing for more than 2 decades, but I still never knew about this little nugget that I learned yesterday from longtime Rio-based activist Carlos Alberto Medeiros. This is Carlos right here. Carlos is a friend, and since the 1970s has been an important activist in the Afro-Brazilian struggle. In a video he released via his IG profile, he revealed something that made me pause for a minute and go, wow, I never knew that. Before I get to that, let me just tell a little bit about the development of the November 20th as the Day of Black Consciousness in Brazil. Okay, this is from the 20th March of Consciência Negra. It looks like it's in Sao Paulo. I'm looking at the Mosby Museum right there. I'm assuming this has to be Sao Paulo. Although there are, a number of cities throughout Brazil who have Day of Consciousness Day rallies and marches. You see, for years, Brazil's media had done specials and television specials and reports, magazines. You'll see, cover stories of magazines and newspapers, and even documentaries about the date of May 13th, 1888. That was the day that the so-called Golden Law, or Lei Áurea, was signed by the then Princess Isabella, which officially abolished Brazil's 350 years of enslavement of Africans and their descendants. The princess had been celebrated as the woman who freed Brazil's slaves ever since. This is Princess Isabel. She is, like I just said, she signed the Golden Law that officially abolished slavery on May 13th, 1888. Just keep that date in mind because it's going to become important in a minute. With this in mind, poet, student, activist Oliveira Silveira, this guy here, I think he passed away, I don't know, somewhere between 10, 15 years ago. I don't remember exactly the date, but he's been gone, I'll probably say at least a decade. Oliveira Silveira had the idea of bringing together a group of interested parties who were dissatisfied with May 13th. We thought that the celebration, besides being white, paid homage to a Portuguese princess and not to the Black people. That's when I realized that we needed to find a date that would do justice to the continuing struggle of Black Brazilians. Another topic that I've talked about in the past, the role of Black abolitionists, the role of the Black population itself in its resistance to slavery. What he's saying is that all of this that Black Brazilians did to push Brazilian authorities to finally come to an end with this slavery era is it was ignored for years. And it's only been in recent years that Black Brazilians have raised enough noise to say, no, this wasn't something that was just, the stroke of a pen that got us emancipation. It was the Black struggle itself that pushed the authorities to make this change, to abolish, just human bondage. It was from motivation like this that in 1971, a group of young Black university students in the south of the country, the city of Porto Alegre, one of Brazil's one of the top cities in the country, one of the most important cities in the country, in the southern part of the country, in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. So they got together. And they questioned Princess Isabella's role in the liberation of Blacks and stressed that the signing of the Golden Law on May 13th, 88 was an incomplete abolition. Until then, the eldest daughter of Emperor Pedro II was seen as a redeemer. And the prominent role of Black people in the abolitionist struggle was made invisible. It was in this context that November 20th, or Black Consciousness Day, emerged as a challenge to the May 13th day that was being celebrated by the media and by prominent authorities in Brazil, totally ignoring the Black role in the abolition of slavery. This is the famed Grupo Palmares from the city of Porto Alegre. They had a lot to do with establishing this date instead of recognizing May 13th that as they call a false abolition or an incomplete abolition, because it just basically freed Black Brazilians from slavery, but in essence, it left them to their own devices to try to survive in a racist society such as Brazil that basically, left them to fend on their own. Thus, a tribute to Zumbi dos Palmares was held on November 20th, 1971, with the intention and inflection of exalting Blackness at the Clube Náutica Marcílio Dias, one of the many clubs frequented by Blacks in Porto Alegre. Another important thing about that is that at that time, it's a well-known fact, even though Brazil always likes to pride itself in saying we never had any legalized segregation, but they had segregation in many different ways, even though it wasn't legally sanctioned. A lot of social clubs that existed throughout Brazil at that time, Black people were simply barred from going to those clubs. So in essence, what they had to do to, have some type of leisure, have a place where Black people could meet and, just enjoy themselves, they had to create their own clubs, the Clubes Sociais dos Negros, the Black social clubs of the day, going back to the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. They created these clubs when they were, in essence, barred from going to predominantly white clubs, or let's say exclusive white clubs. At that time, the date was not yet being called the National Day of Black Consciousness. The name was given 7 years later at an assembly of the Unified Black Movement Against Racial Discrimination. Today, they just call it the Movimento Negro, Movimento Negro Unificado, or the Unified Black Movement. So it was given by the activist named Paulo Roberto dos Santos. In the years that followed, the dismantling of the myth of the Brazilian racial democracy gained momentum, and it continues to this day. So this is another flyer for the Dia de Consciência Negra, November 20th, the Day of Black Consciousness. It says dignity and respect doesn't have color. Okay. November 20th is on the calendar of 5 Brazilian states and more than 1,000 cities, municipalities, and has been on the school calendar for basic education since 2003. And in 2011, the celebration was instituted by a presidential decree as the National Day of Zumbi and Black consciousness. And now it's very close to becoming a national holiday. It's important to point that out. It is still not recognized as a national holiday. Basically, cities and states across the country have they're not obligated, but they can choose to celebrate that day if they so choose. The Senate had already approved the measure in 2022, and the issue is currently being considered by the Chamber of Deputies, which is Brazil's House of Representatives. The rapporteur of Bill 482 slash 2017, Senator Paulo Paim, one of the few Black senators in the country, is committed to getting the House to recognize the importance of this historic milestone. This is the image that's usually portrayed of Zumbi dos Palmares, the leader of the famed quilombo dos Palmares in northeast Brazil. It's a place that has historical significance even to this day. So, in a speech, I called on the House of Representatives to urgently vote on this bill, which will make Black Consciousness Day a national holiday. Is it a tribute to Zumbi? Yes, but it's also a day for the Black people, or for the Brazilian people in general, to reflect on all kinds of prejudice. It happened in the United States, and there is a national holiday in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Popular pressure for approval in Congress is important. The drumbeat has to be heard, said Senator Paim. Lawyer Antonio Carlos Cortes, a member of the original formation of the Palmares Group, or Grupo Palmares, was at the intense meetings to draw up the proposal to contest May 13th, and explains that the idea came from the book Quilombo dos Palmares by the writer Edson Carneiro. I discovered Edison's book, Quilombo dos Palmares, in the public library of the state of Rio de Janeiro, of the state of Rio Grande do Sul in the south of the country. In that book, I looked for Zumbi's date of birth, but I couldn't find it. Then I found the day of his death. I took this book to the group made up of Ilmo Silva, Vilmar Nunes, Luis Paulo Alcir Santos, Jorge Antonio dos Santos, and Oliveira Ferreira da Silveira, said the lawyer. The proposal was defended by the young people of the Rio Grande do Sul, this proposal by this group from Rio Grande do Sul gained momentum at the end of the 1970s, when it was taken up by the Unified Black Movement, or again the Movimento Negro, in Sao Paulo. During one of the Black organization's meetings, according to journalist Carlos Alberto Medeiros, who I mentioned before, activist Paulo Roberto dos Santos suggested the name Black Consciousness Day, inspired by the phrase, "This is the day of Black awareness," by who? Reverend Jesse Jackson, in the documentary Wattstax of 1973. Now, I know we have problems with Jesse Jackson. I'm not going to get into Jesse Jackson. I know there's people who have called Jesse Jackson out for years. But at one time, Jesse Jackson was an important figure in the struggle for civil rights in the United States. Everybody remembers the famous speech that he made at the Wattstax event, in the early 70s. So, this is a connection that shows, Afro-Brazilians always did look to African Americans as inspiration for their own struggle. Okay. So this is Carlos Alberto Medeiros talking. He says the expression National Black Consciousness Day appeared at one of the first meetings of the Unified Black Movement in Sao Paulo at the suggestion of activist Paulo Roberto dos Santos, inspired by a phrase uttered by the Reverend Jesse Jackson, a great leader of the African American Black movement, in a documentary about a Black music festival held in Los Angeles in 1972. He makes a very striking speech, and at one point he says, "This is the day of Black awareness," recalled the journalist, who is one of the creators of Cucine, the largest digital collection of Black culture in Latin America. Just important to point out, Jesse Jackson has made links with Black Brazil for a number of years. I don't know how long he's been traveling there, but I saw a picture of Jesse Jackson was in Brazil sometime in 1996, and he met with all of the activists, some popular actors and singers at the time. He's always had links with Brazil. I think it was 2013 or 14 at the so-called Troféu Raça Negra Awards. I was there that particular night when they honored Jesse Jackson. As I said, I'm not here to talk about the controversies surrounding Jesse Jackson. I got my own views on Jesse Jackson, but I'm just putting a historical context on how Jesse Jackson, something that he said, influenced calling this day the National Day of Black Consciousness. Now, consciência in Portuguese can be translated as either consciousness or awareness. So out of Wattstax, when Jesse Jackson made that famous speech, fist in the air, and he said, "This is the day of Black awareness," the Black Brazilian activists said, "Hey, that's a great idea. Why don't we call November 20th the National Day of Black Consciousness, or Black Awareness, if you prefer that translation?" So he's the activist that I'm talking about who influenced the naming. The actual date, November 20th, this group, Grupo Palmares in the south of Brazil, came up with the idea to replace May 13th. They rather than recognize the signing of the Golden Law by the then princess of, the royal family of 1888, they says, no, we're going to celebrate November 20th, the day that Zumbi was killed or the day that he died, in recognition as one of our greatest leaders. Moving on. As we have seen, Afro-Brazilians have long looked to the struggle of African Americans to draw inspiration for their own struggle. As previously mentioned, the push for recognizing November 20th as a national holiday in Brazil is partially inspired by the creation of a national holiday for Martin Luther King Jr., while the naming of November 20th as Black Consciousness Day was inspired by an excerpt from a Jesse Jackson speech. So we know that this is Richard Roundtree, shout out. Richard Roundtree died a couple of weeks ago at the age of 81. So what's his connection in all of this? Let's keep going. I would also like to add that actor Richard Roundtree, who recently passed away at the age of 81, was also an inspiration for a series of Black dances that were being held in Rio de Janeiro in the 1970s, organized by folks like cultural historian Dom Filó and the aforementioned Carlos Alberto Medeiros. These events were dubbed what? Noites de Shaft, or Shaft Nights, named after the character played by Richard Roundtree in the 1971 film Shaft. These Noites de Shaft attracted young Black Brazilians who liked to listen to and dance to the sounds of 1970s Black American soul and funk, right? Remember, samba historically is it's similar to the history of African American jazz and blues. You have in Brazil, you have samba and choro. Samba was adopted as like a national culture, a national music that comes out of Black culture. But Black Brazilians along the way felt like, and coming into their consciousness, they felt that samba was appropriated by Brazilian elites as a way of unifying people and saying, we all get along here. We don't have any race problems. We all dance. We all like samba. So they felt this exclusion, that they were excluded from Brazilian society. They says, we need our own culture because they've taken part of our culture and nationalized it, thus kind of erasing the resistance that we've had for hundreds of years. So along the way, they started getting into Black American, funk and soul music as kind of like oppositional. The Black dances that they would have, the young people of Rio and other places like Sao Paulo, Salvador, and Belo Horizonte, Black people were going to these dances, and it was the first time that they felt a sense of pride. They weren't just dances. The organizers of these dances would often tell a little bit about Black history and the necessity of feeling pride and being Black, being proud of your skin color, being proud of your features, being proud of your hair texture. So these dances, the images that they saw coming from, the United States, Filó, he had connections with African Americans at the time, going back and forth, and he would come back with these films, Wattstax and Shaft and other films from the Blaxploitation era. He would show these films. He would sneak them in because I read somewhere where it said, because of the dictatorship, the Brazilian dictatorship from 64 to 85 they were living under, they prohibited these types of films. And he would show them at these dances, and in between, slides that he would show of African Americans, he would show slides and films of some of these movies coming out of the 70s of the United States, and kind of lecture Black Brazilians on like, hey, look, this is what the Americans are doing. This Black Americans are proud of who they are. We have to have some of that also. So this is the connection that I'm making between Richard Roundtree and the Noites de Shaft, the Shaft Nights, in Brazil, where these Black Brazilians were starting to feel a pride in being Black for the first time in their lives. This is Dom Filó, and this is Carlos Alberto Medeiros. This is from 1972. It was at a club called Clube Renascença. It's called, if you translate, it's like the Renaissance Club. It was one of the Black social clubs that they mounted, that they created when Black Brazilians were being excluded from, popular white clubs. This picture is from 1972 at one of the Shaft Nights, where they would have these dances, they would show these films and these slides. These two guys. This is like 51 years ago. Okay, but these two guys are very important in the recording of Black cultural history in Rio de Janeiro. Law, again here, also managed to sneak in films like Shaft in the middle of an oppressive dictatorship to show these audiences. Between the showing of films such as Shaft and Wattstax, Law would make speeches telling young Black people that it was okay to have pride in their Blackness and that they needed to go to school to improve their futures. Law would promote Shaft as a Black James Bond from Harlem, a hero, an image that Black Brazilians were not accustomed to at the time. These events of the 1970s, along with the African American connections with Brazil dating back to the 1930s and 1950s, and now in the 21st century, are just a few of the few reasons that I felt the need to create the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel and the blog. So, hope you enjoy. A couple other things I want to point out before I move on. This was, I think it was in 2000, might have been 2019. It was in the Brazilian Congress, and it was in celebration of 131 years of the abolition of slavery. And members of the Movimento Negro invaded. They came into that Congress, and they kind of interrupted the tribute to Princess Isabel. Like, no, this is not going to go down. You guys are not going to keep promoting the hero of abolition as this woman right here, Princess Isabel, and just totally ignore the Black role in the abolition of slavery. This is what they did in the Brazilian National Congress at that time. Intriguing. They just took over. Someone from the Movimento Negro said the celebration of the signing of the Golden Law by Princess Isabel on May 13th is disrespectful with the historical struggle of the Black movements and incompatible with the constitutional principles of equality and non-discrimination. So that's a big deal. So the Movimento Negro has taken this over. It's like, we're not going to be celebrating May 13th anymore. It's still it's an incomplete abolition. And you're not going to erase the names of the Black Brazilians who fought for that, for the end of slavery. So then out of those 1970s Black dances, comes a Black Rio, Black Sao Paulo, Black Salvador, Black Belo Horizonte, a cultural revolution that instilled a fear of Black people. There was recently a documentary that came out about that time that I'm definitely going to have to do a story on, but this is why I wanted to present this material today. Very important. We see that Black Brazilians have taken the lead in telling their own story, and people like Dom Filó and Carlos Alberto Medeiros have played a leading role in bringing this to the fore for Black Brazilians to lead their own movements and have recognition of the Black role in the abolition of slavery. So that's just a little bit of the background of November 20th, how it came to be. This man right here, Oliveira Silveira, other activists wanted to take away this idea that it was all about Princess Isabella signing a piece of paper, which it was not. And it leads us to the march and the Day of Black Consciousness, which celebrates the memory of Zumbi dos Palmares. Big shout out to Carlos Alberto Medeiros. So with that said, I'm going to end this video here. Want to definitely know what you guys thought about today's video. Definitely leave a comment in the comment section. Consider liking this video, sharing this video, subscribing to the channel if you've seen more than a couple of videos that you appreciate it. Click on that notification bell so you'll be one of the first to get my videos when I put them up. If you like this video, definitely feel free to tip a brother. I got my Cash app is with the $ Mr. Marcus 72. That's MrMarQues 72. Tip me in proportion to what you think with the value of this video. With that said, I'm going to leave this video here and invite you all to come check out the next video that I post.